A brand new house, barely 6 months old, and the walls are already falling apart. Not cracking, not settling, peeling. Long sheets of paint curling away from the drywall, like old wallpaper, revealing something underneath that no homeowner ever wants to see. The buyers had done everything right. They inspected the home. They hired a reputable builder. They walked through every room before closing day and admired the crisp, clean paint job that made the house feel brand new. What they didn't know is that the walls around them were hiding a mistake made months earlier, one so common that it happens in new construction homes across the country every single day, and most people never even notice until it's too late. If you've ever wondered why some homes develop bubbling walls, strange stains, or paint that fails within a year, while others stay flawless for over a decade, you're about to find out exactly why. And if you care about protecting your home, your investment, or just want to know what your builder might be hiding behind a fresh coat of paint, subscribe now, because every week we dig into the construction failures nobody talks about, the ones hiding in plain sight inside homes just like yours. At first glance, the house looked perfect. The trim was crisp. The walls were a soft, neutral gray that photographed beautifully for the real estate listing. Everything about the paint job screamed quality and craftsmanship. But paint is deceptive. It's the last thing applied to a home, and because of that, it's incredibly good at covering up problems that happened long before the painters ever showed up. A wall can look flawless the day you move in and start failing within weeks, and by the time the damage becomes visible, the real cause is buried deep inside the wall, where nobody can see it. The first clue in this story wasn't even inside the house. It was outside, along the foundation, where the soil sloped the wrong way. Water was draining toward the house instead of away from it, something that happens more often than you'd think, especially on homes built quickly to meet demand. Builders, under pressure to finish fast, sometimes skip proper grading, the process of shaping the soil around a foundation so rainwater flows away from the home instead of pooling against it. It seems like a minor landscaping detail. It is not. That water was seeping into the foundation walls, slowly, silently, month after month, long before anyone noticed a single problem indoors. Here's where it gets interesting. Moisture doesn't stay outside. It travels. Concrete and drywall are both porous, meaning they can absorb water like a sponge, even when they look completely dry on the surface. That moisture worked its way through the foundation and into the framing, then crept upward into the drywall in the basement and lower level walls. And this is the moment most homeowners never notice, because nothing looked wrong yet. The walls were dry to the touch. The paint looked perfect. But underneath, a slow disaster was already taking shape. Professional painters know something that most people don't. Paint is not just decoration, it's a barrier. And like any barrier, it can only do its job if the surface underneath is properly prepared. When drywall holds even a small amount of trapped moisture, applying paint on top of it is like sealing a wet sponge in plastic wrap. The moisture has nowhere to go. It sits there, trapped between the wall and the paint film, waiting for the right conditions to cause a problem. And in this house, those conditions arrived faster than anyone expected. Within a few months, small bubbles started appearing near the baseboards. At first, they looked harmless, almost like tiny air pockets in the paint. Most homeowners would walk right past them without a second thought. But this is exactly the kind of hidden detail that changes everything, because those bubbles are one of the earliest visible signs that moisture is trapped behind the paint film, pushing against it from the inside, looking for a way out. As the weeks passed, the bubbles grew larger. Then they started to split open, revealing a chalky, discolored surface underneath. Not the clean drywall the homeowners expected, but something soft, damp, and slightly darker than the rest of the wall. This is the point where most people finally call a professional, and this is also the point where the real story behind their expensive new home starts to come out. A trained inspector doesn't just look at the paint, they look at what the paint is trying to hide. Using a moisture meter, a simple tool that measures how much water is present inside a material, the inspector found readings far above normal in the lower sections of the wall. That confirmed what the visual clues had already suggested. Moisture had been sitting inside that wall for months, likely since long before the final coat of paint was ever applied. But here's the part that surprised even the homeowners. This wasn't a one-time flood or a burst pipe. There was no dramatic moment where water rushed in. This was something far more dangerous because it was slow, invisible, and completely silent. Small amounts of moisture, day after day, seeping in from that poorly graded soil outside, working their way through the foundation, and settling into the wall cavity where nobody could see it happening. Builders under tight deadlines often make a critical decision that homeowners never learn about. They paint over walls before the underlying moisture problem has actually been fixed, because visually, everything looks fine. The drywall might feel dry on the surface, even when it's holding moisture deeper inside. A rushed crew, focused on hitting a closing date, doesn't always wait the extra days needed to confirm a wall is fully dry before sealing it up with primer and paint. It's a mistake that costs almost nothing to make and thousands of dollars to fix. And this is where the story takes another turn, because the paint bubbles weren't just a cosmetic problem. They were a warning sign of something much bigger developing inside the walls. When drywall stays damp for extended periods, it becomes the perfect environment for mold, a type of fungus that thrives in moisture and can spread quickly through wall cavities, insulation, and framing. Mold doesn't need light. It doesn't need much moisture. It just needs time. And this wall had been giving it exactly that for months. When the contractor finally opened up the wall to investigate, what they found confirmed everyone's worst fear. Behind that beautifully painted surface was a section of drywall that had turned soft and discolored, with dark patches spreading along the lower few inches near the baseboard. The insulation behind it was damp and matted down, no longer doing its job of keeping the home efficient. And the wooden framing, the actual skeleton of the house, showed early signs of staining where moisture had been steadily soaking into the wood. This is the moment where the true cost of the mistake becomes impossible to ignore. What started as a simple grading issue outside the home, something that could have been fixed for a few $100s by reshaping the soil, had turned into a full wall reconstruction. The damaged drywall had to be completely removed. The wet insulation had to be pulled out and replaced. The framing had to be treated and dried before any new material could go back in. And only after all of that could new drywall, primer, and paint be reapplied, this time the right way. Compare that to what a professional approach looks like from the very beginning, and the difference is staggering. A quality builder grades the soil properly before construction even finishes, making sure water flows away from the foundation instead of toward it. They allow adequate drying time for new drywall, especially in basements and lower-level walls where moisture risk is highest. They use a moisture meter to confirm walls are truly dry, not just checking with a hand or a visual glance before ever picking up a paint roller. It takes a little more time, it takes a little more patience, but it prevents exactly the kind of disaster this family experienced. Most homeowners never think to ask their builder about grading, moisture readings, or drying times before drywall gets painted. Why would they? Paint is the finishing touch, the pretty final layer that makes a house feel like a home. Nobody imagines that the biggest structural risks in their new house could be hiding directly behind that finishing touch. But professionals in this industry know that paint, more than almost any other material in a home, has an incredible ability to disguise problems rather than reveal them. Now here's where the story becomes even more important for anyone watching this from inside their own home right now. This particular family's house happened to show obvious signs, bubbling and peeling, that eventually forced them to investigate. But not every case is that visible. Some homes trap moisture behind walls for years without a single bubble ever appearing on the surface, especially in areas where certain types of paint were used. There's a critical difference between paint types that most homeowners have never heard explained clearly. Some paints allow a small amount of water vapor to pass through them, letting a wall breathe and slowly release trapped moisture over time. Other paints create an almost completely sealed surface, which might sound like a good thing, but in the wrong situation, it becomes a serious risk. If a wall wasn't fully dry before painting, and the paint used seals moisture inside rather than letting it escape, that moisture has almost nowhere to go except deeper into the wall structure, quietly causing damage for months or even years before anything visible shows up. This single decision, choosing the wrong type of paint for the situation, is one of the most overlooked mistakes in residential construction. It's rarely malicious. Most crews aren't trying to cut corners in a harmful way. They're simply following standard procedure without stopping to consider the unique conditions of that particular wall, that particular basement, or that particular home's drainage situation. But the consequences fall entirely on the homeowner, sometimes years down the road, long after the builder has moved on to other projects. As the investigation into this house continued, the inspector uncovered something else, a detail that most people watching this would never think to check. Near one of the windows on the same wall, there was a small section where the caulking, the flexible sealant used to close gaps around window frames, had shrunk and pulled away slightly from the frame. It was barely noticeable, just a thin, dark line where there should have been a solid seal. But that tiny gap had been allowing outside air and small amounts of moisture to seep in around the window for who knows how long. This is exactly the kind of small detail that most homeowners walk past every single day without a second thought. A hairline gap in caulking doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't look like anything at all, really. But water doesn't need a big opening to cause big problems. It just needs time and a path. And this window had been quietly providing both. Combined with the moisture already rising from the poorly graded soil outside, this home had two separate sources feeding water into the same wall cavity. Neither one alone might have caused a serious problem quickly, but together they created the perfect conditions for the kind of damage that eventually forced this family to tear open their walls and start over in that section of the house. The good news, and there is good news here, is that every single mistake in this story was completely preventable. Professional builders address grading before they ever pour a foundation, shaping the land so water naturally flows away from the home in every direction. They inspect caulking and seals around windows and doors as a standard part of quality control, not as an afterthought. They understand that drywall needs adequate time to dry, sometimes several days longer than a rushed schedule allows, before it's safe to paint. And they choose paint types deliberately, based on the specific conditions of each wall, rather than applying the same product everywhere out of habit or convenience. For this particular family, the repair process took several weeks. The contractor removed the damaged section of drywall down to the framing, treated the wood to eliminate the mold growth, and allowed everything to dry completely before rebuilding the wall from scratch. They corrected the caulking around the window, resealing it properly this time. And outside, a landscaping crew came in to regrade the soil, reshaping it so water would finally drain away from the foundation the way it should have from the very beginning. When the wall was finally repainted, using a slightly different, more breathable paint appropriate for that basement environment, It looked identical to how it did the very first day the family moved in. Clean, fresh, perfect. And that's exactly what makes this story so important for anyone watching. A wall can look absolutely flawless while hiding a serious problem underneath. Paint doesn't just cover surfaces. Sometimes it covers mistakes. This family was fortunate in one specific way. Their problem became visible early, through those small bubbles near the baseboard, giving them a chance to catch it before the damage spread further into the framing, or up into higher sections of the wall. Many homeowners aren't so lucky. Some don't notice anything unusual until years later, when a musty smell develops, when someone in the household starts experiencing unexplained allergy symptoms, or when they finally decide to sell the house and a buyer's inspector discovers the damage during a routine walkthrough. That's the real danger hiding inside stories like this one. It's not just about one unlucky house or one rushed painting crew. It's about how easy it is for serious problems to hide behind something as simple, as ordinary, and as overlooked as a coat of paint. Every homeowner walks past painted walls every single day without a second thought. Most people will never think to ask whether the drywall behind that paint was truly dry when it was applied, whether the soil outside slopes the right way, or whether the caulking around their windows is still doing its job. But now you know exactly what to look for. A small bubble near a baseboard, a faint musty smell in a basement corner, a thin gap in the caulking around a window. Individually, these details seem insignificant. Together, they can tell the story of a mistake that happened months or even years before you ever noticed it. One that's been quietly growing more expensive with every passing week it goes unaddressed. The next time you walk through a freshly painted room, whether it's in a brand new home or one you've lived in for years, take a closer look. Run your hand along the lower sections of the wall. Check for any subtle texture changes, any small bumps, any areas that feel slightly different from the rest of the surface. These are the clues that most people never think to search for, the same clues that revealed the entire hidden story behind this one family's home. Construction mistakes rarely announce themselves loudly. They don't come with warning signs or flashing lights. They hide quietly behind trim work, underneath fresh paint, and inside walls that look absolutely perfect from the outside. The homes that stay problem-free for decades aren't lucky. They're the ones where every step, from grading the soil to sealing the windows to properly drying the drywall, was done correctly the first time, long before anyone ever picked up a paintbrush. If this investigation taught you anything, it's that the most expensive mistakes in construction are almost never the ones you can see. They're the ones hiding just beneath the surface, waiting patiently behind a wall that looks absolutely perfect. So the next time you walk through your own home, take a closer look at the details everyone else walks right past, because you never know what story your walls might be quietly trying to tell you. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden mistakes builders don't want you to notice, stick around, because next week we're heading behind another set of walls, and what we find there might just change the way you see your own home forever.